Hello, and welcome back to the Joy Within's podcast. I want to dive straight into it today because I want to share a frame, a way of thinking, that I think is absolutely crucial right now. It's something I use whenever I'm speaking with someone I really strongly disagree with. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I had a really tough conversation with a client the other day. And I wanted to share because I think a lot of us are going through some version of this right now. We've got Thanksgiving this week, the holidays are coming up, and I know a lot of us have plans with family. And actually, I'm visiting family right now. I'm recording this from my sister-in-law's house. And yet, our world has never seemed more divided. And I know I have, in my extended family, a few people who think quite a bit differently than I do. And even more than that, there's always that one uncle or that one cousin or whomever who just can't not bring up some extremely controversial views at the table. I'm sure you can relate to this, so I thought I'd share the frame that I use that helps me with this. And I think the crux of this frame revolves around compassion, but it's probably a bit different than the way you might usually think about that. But before I share what it is, I just want to say I think it's really easy to misinterpret this way of thinking. It's easy to interpret it as an egoistic, holier-than-thou type of attitude, and that's not at all how I mean it. Because I think we all have to understand that there are really two ways we can practice compassion. The one way, what I would say is probably the normal way, has actually a little bit of a hint of egoism, maybe of pride, or of an unconscious bias, like a better-than sort of approach. And we think of compassion almost as a mini act of charity. And I think this happens to everyone, to be clear, and I think that we're all guilty of it at different times. I think we act compassionately because we feel badly for someone. And there's a kind of this inherent bias that we think that the way that we are thinking, or whatever resources we have accrued, is somehow better than this person that we're showing compassion for. And we think highly of ourselves because we are showing that compassion. So just to give you a quick example of this, the other day, I went into the supermarket and there was a homeless man out front. And so when I was in the supermarket, I bought him a couple of things to eat. And I gave it to him on my way out of the store. And it's not like I did that to stroke my ego. I did it because I felt badly for him. I mean, it's November, it's starting to get cold out, and I was genuinely just like, this man needs something to eat. But I realized later that within that little act was also an unconscious bias, an unconscious belief. Not even that I'm better than him, but that I'm doing better than him, that he needs my help, that I'm more fortunate in some way. And I think that's kind of normal, because when we give, we so often give because we feel fortunate and we want to help others. But my point here is that on some level, there's a sense of inequality within that. I am assuming that this person is not exactly where he needs to be. I am assuming that he is not serving me in the same way that I am serving him. I am assuming that it is not an incredible source of strength and of beauty to be on the path that he is on. And I think it is really, really challenging sometimes not to let our own beliefs, our own biases, place judgment on that. And again, I don't mean this as a commentary on the rightness or wrongness of anything or the way society should be or others should act. I mean it as a commentary on the unconscious bias we hold without ever even really becoming aware of it. So there's compassion that comes from that really subtle, really hard to spot sense of egoism. Usually not intentional, but still it's often there, just that hint of pride within it. And then there's the compassion that comes from a really true sense of equality, a mutual serving of each other, a deep sense of humility, a deep knowingness that we receive what we give. We receive compassion. We feel true compassion because we can give it. There is a really profound humility in being compassionate in that way. And I don't think we're used to looking at it from that lens. So I know this is a long way around to Thanksgiving, but I'm getting there, I promise. Because my point is that there are two basic ways to interpret what I'm about to say. You could interpret it from that ego-driven standpoint, from that standpoint of, I know best. Maybe it's not in I'm better, but in I'm right. And I think that's normal. It's okay to think in that way because we believe in our own beliefs. I mean, if we didn't think our beliefs were right, we wouldn't believe them. So you could interpret this frame from that perspective, from a rightness or wrongness, from a higher or lower, a better than and less than. But you could also interpret it with very deep humility, The kind of humility that makes you really reassess why you think and act in the way that you do. And if you can reframe how you think, you might find something within yourself that you hadn't before. So, Turkey. So if you have that controversial person in your family, if you find it challenging to deal with some of the ideas that might come up over the holidays, then I encourage you to ask yourself a simple question, which is, what must this person had to have experienced in order to hold that belief? Obviously, if they have such a fundamentally different belief to yours, their experience, the way they interpret the world, must be completely different. And I think it takes a large degree of humility to acknowledge that, honestly, we never have any idea how other people move through the world. We fundamentally cannot know. Even if we have strong communication, even if we are extremely eloquent, we can never really know what that person's experience is, how that experience has interacted with other beliefs that they might hold, and how all of that might have morphed into what they currently believe, the way they currently act or think. But if we were to reflect on it, we could see quite simply that there must be some reason for their beliefs. We just don't understand what that reason is. So asking that question, what must this person have experienced in order to think in this way? What other beliefs must they hold? What has shaped that outlook? Asking those types of questions will ground you into a state of curiosity. I find it gets me into a more humble, open mindset that allows me to use this frame from a receptive state of mind, rather than an egoistic one. So the frame I use is this. Everyone always acts according to their own level of awareness. We can only ever act according to our own state of consciousness in that moment. But I like using the word awareness because I think we can shift in and out of different states. We can be at different levels of awareness depending on our mood or depending on ideas that we pick up as we move throughout our lives. We are all always evolving. And I think that if we can recognize that we only ever operate according to that level of awareness, it helps us to have compassion, both for ourselves and for others. Whenever we observe a level of consciousness that isn't what we believe it should be. Again, this has to come from a place of deep humility, and we can apply it equally to ourselves and to others. We can, for example, say something in the heat of an argument that we then regret later, and only later do we recognize that what we said wasn't really reflective of the level at which we wish to operate, the consciousness that we wish to hold. Equally, we can often see within others an expression of a level of consciousness that is not what we prefer. We don't agree with it. And yet, we don't have to invalidate that level of awareness simply because we don't agree. We don't have to believe it to be less than ours, but to see it instead from a perspective of wholeness. That means it's not about anyone being right or wrong, but about allowing and accepting the expressions that are most difficult for us to hear. And I think that the more we can accept those differing views, the more we can actually see elements of them reflected within ourselves, within our own consciousness. And yes, that probably comes out in different ways. It comes out with different symbols, different parts of our lives that we struggle with. But I think the same core challenges that we observe from others are also within ourselves. And as we learn to accept, from a state of true humility and true equality, that all of these different views are equally valid, equally grounded in one person's experience of the world, then the more we can see that even that crazy uncle or that cousin or whomever it is in fact serving us, even if we don't immediately understand how they are serving us. In a very real way, I think if we have the perception of what is quote-unquote a lower view, which we then choose to interpret as being equally valid as our own, then that will lift us into a higher state. But we have to practice doing it. We have to think about it from the right frame, from that right, open, humble questioning, a curious approach to why someone might think that way. So when this comes up, inevitably, at some point this week or this month, or whenever you're seeing that person, I encourage you to take this approach. Ask an open question silently to yourself to help you recognize that their views are grounded for them in a combination of personal experience and belief. It's grounded in what they perceive as truth. Then recognize that the reason they act and think as they do is because of that experience. It's because of that level of awareness. It is not better or worse. It is just different, even if you disagree vehemently with it. Taking that approach, I think, will not only help you to have a more peaceful, more congenial holiday, but it will also help you to remain more centered and more at peace as you move through it, as well as to step into your own next level of awareness, whatever that is for you. Because there is somewhere a higher version of yourself. And at least for me, I like to imagine that my own higher self would probably disagree with many of my beliefs, my lack of awareness from that perspective. And I can only hope that he would have immense compassion for me as I move along in my journey. And I try to pull some of that compassion forward to express it myself. So that's it for today. I wish you a happy Thanksgiving this week. And if you like today's episode, please pass it along. We are so divided right now. And I think that now more than ever, we need to come together to see unity in our differences, to accept each other exactly as we are, and to validate and to appreciate the differences that we each hold. And I believe that the more we can share this type of perspective with others, the more it helps to build that unity and acceptance globally. So thank you so much for your time. Know that I love you and I appreciate you wherever you are, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to today's episode. When you're ready to take a stand against the stress and negativity in your life, head over to thejoywithin.org, sign up, and choose the path that's right for you. When you join, you'll learn a simple process to activate your natural inner joy so you can regain control and become the calm, confident, and happy person you deserve to be. Visit thejoywithin.org to get started today. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone you love, because I think we can all use a little more joy in our crazy modern world.